We've got quite a doozy of a meeting for you today, 18 agenda items for discussion. So I hope you all had your coffee. Let's call this meeting to order at 7:12 p.m. and move to roll call. Miss Alfonso Wells.
Present.
Mr. Miser.
Here.
Mr. Price.
Here.
Miss Salisbury.
Here.
Miss Scales. Miss Scales, we can't hear you right now. So Miss Scales is not connected to audio. Is someone able to reach out to her just to let her know to maybe try to rejoin the meeting? Miss Stribling?
Present.
And Mayor Schwartzwelder?
Here.
Great. Well, hopefully Miss Scales can reconnect. I know she is in a place where her Wi-Fi is a little spotty, so hopefully she can still tune into the meeting. Let's move on to our public comment. We have two public comments from residents. The first is Brandon Mahler. He wants to share a little bit about traffic concerns at Westmoreland and Hampton. So Brandon, if you want to unmute and go ahead, the floor is yours.
Sure. Am I able to be heard?
We can hear you.
Sorry, I don't trust technology. Okay, so I'll be brief. Thank you for members of council for allowing me to speak tonight, and thank you to Sarah for facilitating. My comment will be exceptionally brief. At the intersection of Westmoreland Avenue and Hampton Avenue, there's a stop sign that is largely ignored. Routinely, drivers will either do a rolling stop or ignore the stop sign altogether, often at speeds of an excess of 24 miles per hour. The intersection is heavily used as a pickup and drop-off location for school buses, which makes me highly concerned. Towards the end, thank you to Sarah for connecting me with Chief Watson, who I spoke with last Wednesday, and he notified me that there'd be an increased police presence at the intersection, which I actually had observed, and I communicated this to Chief Watson beforehand, so I absolutely have noticed that, and I appreciate that. But long-term, I wanted to know if it would be possible to consider the possibility of complementing the stop sign and the increased police presence with a solar-powered 24-hour flashing beacon, which may aid drivers in noticing the stop sign throughout the day and in the absence of police presence.
Mr. Miller, thanks so much for those comments. The way we've been doing this is we, kind of when we get to the officials, the chairs, department heads report, Chief Watson, if you don't mind kind of jotting that down in your notes to kind of share your perspectives based off of what his recommendation or suggestion is, and see if this is something at that point in time when you give your report. Yeah, if you can speak a little bit more on that.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, Mr. Miller, was there anything else that you wanted to say?
No, thank you all for your time and have a good night.
All right, wonderful. Thank you. All right, next we have Mary Miller to talk about the veterans banners and various SEDCO projects. Ms. Miller, the floor is yours.
Hi, Mary Miller. I just wanted to real quickly, I wanted to thank everyone involved for helping us with the Veterans Banner Project. It was a huge success. I especially wanted to thank Chief Watson and the police and the fire department for putting together a color guard. That was very much appreciated by the veterans, especially. We got a lot of really nice comments on how nice that was for them to be there. Also, I want to thank the DPW and Mr. D'Ambrosio for getting all of the banners up on Washington and Waverly. I know that was a big project. I also know that the ones on Noble Street are not up yet, and I'm just wondering if we can get some kind of an idea when those will be going up, because we've gotten a lot of emails from people asking when they can expect to see those. So I don't know if someone can just reach out to me and let me know that, so I know. I don't want to promise that they'll be up, before it's physically able to do that. There's that. Also, this project has generated a lot of interest in, people wanting to do more and have more banners. So SEDCO started looking at, what the possibilities were. And one of the obvious things that came up was Monongahela Avenue. And, obviously Monongahela is in desperate need of some streetscape work anyway. So we thought maybe that would be, a good push for Sedco to start, coming up with ideas for streetscape and for the borough to consider that. Also, in light of all of the regional development going on, especially over at Cary Furnace, Monongahela is really pretty much a throughway over to Cary Furnace. And now that they're going to start working on the hot metal bridge for access to the bike trails and the walking trails on the other side of the river, we think that maybe it would be a good time to start thinking about bike access and maybe putting in bike lanes and finding ways to make access from Swissvale to the trails rather than people having to go through Swissvale to go around and across the Rankin Bridge to get to trails, because that's, Swissvale's getting left out of a lot of the regional development that's going on around us. So, the banner project kind of accelerated some of our thinking on that. So just so that Sedco is going to be looking at ways that we can, suggestions that we can make for, connecting Swissvale into some of the regional development that's going on around us. And we kind of think that bikes are going to be a big part of that. So I just want to let you know our thinking and, where we're going with that. And that's it.
Great.
Thank
you
you
very
everyone
much
for your help.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Miller, for your comments. Mr. D'Ambrosio, if you could comment on the veterans banners as part of your report, and Mr. Batchy, if you don't mind sharing as part of your report, I know we do have some bike and hiking trail projects that have been in the mix for a number of years to connect some of those areas. If you could just maybe speak a little bit to that with regard to Ms. Miller's comments regarding that connection.
Great.
Well, thank you both for that.
Thank you.
Ms. Scales, can I just verify that you are on this call and can hear us now?
Yes, I am on and I can hear everyone. Thank you so much for your patience.
Sure, no problem. Thanks for getting that worked out. Okay, well, let's move to our agenda items. Agenda item A, discuss hiring Shatara Wilson as an administrative assistant in the administration office. Mr. Batch, if you want to speak a little bit to this.
Sure. We hired Ms. Wilson in June as a temporary office employee. She has worked out extremely well. I can't say enough good things about her. I mean, we've had no problems with her. She's done anything we've asked her. She's done much more than we've asked her. Very self-motivated, self-starter, and she would be a good complement to our staff in the administrative office. We have talked with the personnel committee about this previously, about putting her on, and this would get us back to a full complement of full-time workers in the office. It is a budgeted position for 2023. So I would like, if we could, to officially hire her as an administrative assistant at next month's meeting.
Great, thank you for that background. Any comments from council members?
I just want to note that she has been doing a really good job. I personally have received and witnessed compliments from members in the community of her level of professionalism and patience when she's interacting with residents and the administration. So good job.
Yeah. Ms. Stribling, you have your hand up.
Yes, I second that. I think she's pleasant every time I go to the borough and witness how pleasant she is, how well she gets along with, all the other members in the borough. I think she would be an amazing fit to our borough and our leadership. So yes, definitely.
And I did receive a question from a member of the public as if this was an advertised position, and we did advertise it back in June, and as a temporary position with the possibility of full-time employment. We received about 12 applicants. We interviewed 4, and Shatara far stood out from the rest of the applicants. And like I said, she's a very good employee, and what Ms. Stribling and Ms. Scales said is 100% correct.
I fully support that too. All right, we ready to move on? Okay, item B, discuss approval of an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with the International Association of Firefighters concerning the creation of 3 additional full-time positions.
So if I can combine item B and C, I'll just talk about them at the same time, which C is discuss the hiring of 3 full-time firefighters. Over the last 6 to 8 months, there's been issues in the fire department with keeping its staff fully to cover all the shifts and at some points where full-time employees have been mandated to work overtime shifts to cover, and also where Chief Wilhelm and Assistant Chief Volpe have had to work weekend shifts, overnight shifts, and that to cover the minimum staffing. And one of the potential solutions that Chief Wilhelm had proposed to the fire committee was to hire 3 additional full-time firefighters. And this was discussed with the fire committee, discussed in executive session with the personnel committee and all of council, and everybody was in agreement. This was something that needs to be done, because when you have part-time firefighters, they typically have full-time jobs elsewhere, and if they get mandated there, they can't come here, and we can't punish them for being mandated at their full-time job. So the solution is to hire additional full-time firefighters here, because now this is their career job, and they're not, they can't say, well, hey, I got to work my other job. This is their job. They have to be here, with the exception of the 8 or 9 vacation days that they receive throughout the year. So this would help the staffing immensely. An MOU has been drafted. It was circulated to everyone. And the only thing that Mr. McTiernan has suggested is we memorialize the wage rate in the MOU, so that it is the same as the part-time firefighters, except these guys are guaranteed a certain number of hours, where the part-timers aren't. The fire committee interviewed 5 candidates a few weeks ago, and decided on the 3 top candidates that they would like to offer the jobs to. In order to move this forward, the fire committee instructed the staff to go ahead and make offers to these 3 candidates. The offers have been made and they were accepted. 2 of the candidates will start full-time on December 11th. One will start on December 25th. He's got a baby coming some mid-December, so he would start as a full-timer on December 25th. These 3 are all current part-time firefighters, so just be moving to full-time status. So they're known commodities. They know, we know what we have in them. So basically we'll be asking you next week to ratify their hiring and to approve this MOU that just spells out that these full-time positions were created as an amendment to the contract. And when we negotiate the contract next year, once the contract's signed, these will be part of that contract moving forward.
Great, thanks, Greg. Any comments or questions from council members? Okay, let's move on to item D. So this D has 2 items. Discuss the proposed 2023 budget. Item I under that is resolution to adopt budget, and item 2 is resolution to set millage rate.
We had a public budget meeting. We held it on November 21st at 6 p.m. and where I went over all the department budgets and changes and what were driving those changes and such. That was held on the 21st. We advertised the budget on the Wednesday, the 23rd. It's required to be advertised for 10 days prior to adoption. So we will have 14 days of advertising. The budget is on our website and I believe linked on our Facebook page, our social media pages. So anybody that wishes to review it can. And I just want to mention they're based upon the feedback of most council members. There was one main change from the budget that we talked about at the November 21st meeting, is that there's an additional 50 cents per hour added to all employees' hourly wages who are hourly employees, and additional $1,000 added to all non-union employees, or I'm sorry, salaried employees' wages. So anybody that's non-union will get the $1,000. Anybody that's union or hourly non-union would get 50 cents an hour additional to what was in that budget as per the directive of the personnel committee and the approval of the others. So that's the only change in the budget that's advertised. that you see online and what we discussed at the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions from council members?
And just to clarify, so next week, we would have to do a resolution to adopt the budget and a resolution to set the millage rate. We don't need to do an ordinance this year because we're not changing the millage rate, so we could just do the adoption by resolution.
Great, thanks. I was going to circle back to that millage question. Yes, Ms. Salisbury.
So we had talked about last time in the meeting, I brought up that we have this new-ish review policy where we do an annual review of employees, and there is a raise aspect that's based on that. Are we sort of doing this as a separate raise from any earned, if you will, raise, that this would be a cost of living type of an adjustment? Is that how we're kind of considering that? I just ask because I know people will ask me what the raises were based on, if they were sort of a merit-based or COLA based.
Yeah, the additional funds that we're talking about are cost of living adjustments, because the cost of living is up 8 to 9%, and most of the contracts called for between 2.5% and 3% raises. So this is to help supplement that, to help the employees at this time. It doesn't bring it anywhere near what the cost of living's up the last 2 years, but it is above and beyond the contractual obligations, and then above and beyond what the non-union, non-bargaining unit members received based upon their performance evaluations.
Is there anything that's necessary to work with the unions on this, or are they not going to have an issue, or do we just not know yet?
We will have to do an MOU with the unions to change the rates in the contracts for the remainder of the life of each individual contract. So basically, I was just going to do a template with them, for all four bargaining units, including school crossing guards, and just state wages per contract, new wages for the remainder of contract. And basically, it's an all or nothing thing. If you want it, take it. If you don't, it's not negotiable. We're not asking them what they want. I mean, here's some extra money. And if the unit as a whole doesn't want it, that's fine.
I'd be surprised if they said no thanks, but
I would too, but we're not asking them for anything in exchange for this. We're just, we're trying to assist them with these high cost of living.
okay. Thank you very much.
All right, hearing nothing else, let's move on to item E, discuss a resolution to approve the proposed TAN loan for 2023. Tax anticipation note, I believe is what that stands for. Mr. Batchy?
That is correct. So every year we take a tax anticipation note of $600,000, and it seems to work out well. We should have a couple $100,000 in the bank going into in the general fund going into 2023. So that between what we have in the bank and $600,000, that will get us through until the real estate tax starts coming in our main source of income in May. We do get earned income tax throughout the spring, as well as our garbage fee is collected starting in February. So the 600,000 extra will help us get through. Everything is the same in the proposal as last year, with the exception of the interest rate, which is at 5.23%, which was previously the last 2 years 2.48%. But I mean, that's no surprise based upon what the prime rate has ballooned to in the last 6 months. So we would need to pass a resolution to approve the TAN loan. At that point, we would work with Mr. McTiernan's office to get an opinion of council submitted to the DCED, and we would get all the paperwork submitted to First Commonwealth so that we could draw the money around the 1st of January.
And as Mr. Batchy said, taking this out at the beginning of the year helps us with our cash flow until the main source of revenue, the real estate taxes, comes in. And then it is paid off before the end of the year, usually in the fall. There's a handful of payments that are made to pay that down until the full balance is paid off the same year that it's taken out. Any comments or questions from council members or elected officials?
Just for my own knowledge, how does the interest accrue on that? Is it annually, monthly? What's the?
It accrues monthly until,
Okay.
and like we made a $300,000 payment a few months ago.
Mhm.
So then the balance is down to 300,000. So that now it only accrues on on what's left.
Thank you.
So next year, we'll have to pay it. Next year, we're gonna have to look at where the cash flow, where we can make maybe smaller chunks off of it to keep the interest amount down, because it is more than twice what it was.
Great. Well, good question. Okay, let's move to item F. There it is. Discuss proposed, so more financing. Discuss proposed financing for municipal building.
So we talked with First Commonwealth Bank about a proposal for the to provide financing for the new municipal building, and they came back with a proposal to provide us, and I'll try to. I was had a hard time understanding it at first too, but I'll try to make it easy enough. They come back with a maximum loan of up to $6.5 million. And now that would be a temporary loan for up to 3 years with interest only payments, which would allow us to get the building built and then wait on our refund from the state on the RCAP grant of $2.5 million, where we would pay interest only for up to 3 years. Now, if we get the RCAP funds sooner, we could then make that $2.5 million payment to the bank and then kick it into normal financing with the full payments. But what they're proposing is the maximum permanent loan of up to $6.5 million, and hopefully we only need $4 to $5 million. An interest rate of 5.1%, which they were reluctant to hold, but they wanted us to approve this last month, but I did want to talk to the finance committee about it first and send this out to council for, to digest so that you had it. Because we talked to them a day or two before the meeting last time. So we did twist their arm a little bit that they will hold the interest rate until tomorrow. It would be a 15-year.
Real quick, not tomorrow, December 8th.
December 8th.
Yeah, the day after our voting meeting.
You're correct. Thank you. Yeah, day after the voting meeting. So they said they will hold it till December 8th to get the, so we could get this through council. They would propose a 15-year loan that's amortized over 30 years. And basically what they want to do is when they have a 30-year loan, there's more risk in their portfolio and they try to limit the risk. So, but what they can do is they amortize it as if it were a 30-year loan. So we're making the payments based upon a 30-year loan. I wouldn't expect that the borough has the capacity to pay this off in 15, and I wouldn't try to push for the borough to pay this off in 15. At a $4 million loan for 15 at this proposal, the payment's $246,000 a year, so a little over $20,000 a month. And at the end of the 15 years, you could either refinance it or pay a balloon payment and pay the mortgage off, which I would just suggest, that at this point, I probably won't be here in 15 years. But I would say the best thing to do is just anticipate in 15 years, you have to refinance the balance for another 15 years. And then the building's paid off in 30 years, which is kind of a standard mortgage. We can refinance with them at a lower rate if the rates drop at any time with no penalty. If we refinance with another bank, there's a 2% fee if we leave First Commonwealth, which is pretty standard on these commercial loans. So because they'll lose a significant amount of money if we refinance outside of with First Commonwealth. But I mean, that's the basic gist of the terms is 5.1% interest rate, which right now, if you've been watching, commercial rates are around 7%. They're willing to offer this to us at 5.1, 15-year amortization, or 15-year loan over a 30-year amortization, balloon payment or refinance in 15 years, up to 3 years interest only, so that we can get our RCAP, get the building built and get our RCAP reimbursement. And the offer expires on December 8th. And if we don't approve it at the next meeting, it's probably going to jump a good 2%, which is a significant amount on this amount we're borrowing.
Well, even like it was the week and a half after our meeting where they proposed this to us, the feds hiked it 0.75%. the prime rate. So, I mean, yeah, this is, if we want to have the lowest interest rate possible at this point in time, I would suggest that we approve this next Wednesday. The hope would be maybe 3 years from now, after the building's built, the interest rates kind of settle down a little bit, and we could always refinance with them and either shorten the term of the loan or lower our payments and create more margin of funds for other things. But any questions or comments from elected officials about what was shared? Okay, great. Let's move on then to item G, discuss a vehicle replacement plan for each department.
Last month, we had circulated to all council members proposed vehicle replacement plans, which were large spreadsheets that showed all the vehicles and equipment that each department owns and uses, and a proposed time frame for replacing them. Most municipalities who have larger fleets, and we do have a fairly large fleet, for a small municipality, because there's, we need different vehicles for different things, since we collect our own trash and sweep our streets, plow our snow, provide full-time police protection, and also provide full-time fire protection. So our fleet is a little larger than a lot of municipalities our size because of that, because a lot of them don't have a paid fire department. Some of them don't have 24-hour police service, and most of them don't collect their own garbage. So we do have a little bit larger fleet, and it does bring some issues into at times when things need replaced. And as far as to try to do this in a manner where to keep the costs kind of even over the years, we came up with this vehicle replacement plan for each department. Now, I did go over this with the police committee, which approved the proposed replacement plan, and the DPW committee, which recommended approval of the proposed replacement plan. I did not get a chance to go over it with the fire committee. We were having a hard time just finding the time to do interviews between the committee members and myself and Chief Wilhelm and Chief Volpe. So basically, the fire one doesn't show any new purchases releases until 2025. So there's 2 leases outstanding right now, which will be paid off in 2024, and that shows a new lease in 25, and that's basically it in the fire. And then a renovation of the ladder truck in 2027. That's basically all we're showing in fire. Basically, the police shows rotating the patrol vehicles every 5 years, the detective vehicles every 7, and the chief's vehicle every 9 to 10 years, K9 vehicles every 8 years. Which they last longer because there's one driver. It's not on the road 24 hours a day with the K9s. Same with the chief's vehicle, detectives vehicles. The detectives vehicles, what we're proposing is just basically, once it's done as a patrol vehicle, take the better patrol vehicles and move them into the detective service, and then make them last a few more years and get rid of the cars that are not performing well. In DPW, the biggest issue there are garbage trucks. And what we proposed there was to replace one in 2023, and then 3 years after that, replace the second one. 4 years after that, replace the third one. So we'd always have one that's say new, 3 years old, 7 years old, and then at the end of lifespan, 3 years old, 7 years old, 10 years old. The 2 that we have, the 2016s right now, 2 of the 3 that we have are 2016s. They've been in service for 7 years. They are getting pretty rough. They're out of service a lot, and they're costing us a lot of money to maintain. And that's one of the reasons, now that if we could get into a rotation plan, those 2 trucks were both paid off this year. So I propose we sell one of them next year and buy a new one at the same time. And then we'll be down to 2 payments next year. So we said there's a savings of over $24,000 next year, but then we can keep the fleet green. And when I say green, I mean new. So speaking of green and sustainable, we've looked at a number of vehicles that, just basically online, talked to some dealers about hybrids, electric vehicles and such. And one of the pledges that I, as the manager, will make the council is we will do the best we can to buy greener, cleaner vehicles. Any police vehicle going forward will be a hybrid. The one we just bought wasn't, because there was one out there that was available, and it was a gasoline engine only. But if we order vehicles, we'll order them as hybrids. Right now, there really aren't that feasible electric police car, but there are feasible hybrids Ford has in the Ford Explorer. They're a few $1,000s more, but the plan budgeted for that and shows that. We did investigate an electric garbage truck. We talked to a supplier in near Butler about it. It was a Peterbilt cab and chassis. Two problems with that is it was about triple the price of a diesel engine. So you're talking for a cabin chassis rather than 125,000, about 375,000 for the cabin chassis. And also with the electric, they do not have electric cabin chassis that is has a gross vehicle weight large enough that it would accommodate our garbage trucks. So, I mean, it's just something, the technology is not there yet, but maybe then in 2026, when we replace the next one, maybe the technology will be there. And we can go to an electric, or maybe they'll have some kind of a hybrid. But right now, you can go from a diesel to a cleaner burning diesel. But like I said, everything we buy, by approving these proposed capital equipment plans, we're not asking you to approve electric, hybrid, or gasoline or diesel. We're just asking you to approve the concept of this is when things are going to be replaced. And as they're replaced, then we'll bring vehicles forth that, these are cleaner, greener vehicles that are sustainable and will benefit our environment and Swissville's environment. So what we're asking is for an agenda item next week to approve the vehicle replacement plans, which then leads into the next three items. We would like to, if you approve the vehicle replacement plans, order 2 police vehicles, because there's a 6 to 8 month lead time on them, a garbage truck, a dump truck, and a pickup truck, because the garbage truck probably will take, be like end of next summer, we would get it. So there's in the vehicles, the ones in public works would be replaced. Our dump truck that's 2010, that the frame's been repaired twice because it cracked twice, and a pickup truck that's 2011 it's seen its better day. It's about at the end of its lifespan. That pickup truck, we may be able to get something in a hybrid model. The dump truck, we would not be able to at this time, because like I said, the technology is just not there on the larger trucks, on the higher capacity and higher powered trucks. The technology is not there yet.
Great, thanks, Mr. Batchy. The language that Mr. Batchy and I had talked about when we were talking about the sustainability is that commitment to hybrid and electric technology where it is technologically and fiscally responsible for us to do. And I think Mr. Batchy gave some examples of where there are some things that just the technology hasn't quite caught up to what our needs are. And there is always the cost issue that we want to do what we can in those ways. So Mr. Batchy, I appreciate that commitment to continue to investigate. Each time we're buying a new vehicle, we can kind of engage the conversation and figure out what is technologically and fiscally responsible for us. One other quick note about those is, Mr. Batchy's request was to approve that purchase in 2022. This would be for 2023. As he said, the vehicles wouldn't be ready for, a lead time of 6 to 9 months. And so there would not be any financial responsibility of that until the 2023 budget. So that would still fall under that fiscal year. Any questions or comments from elected officials? All right, let's keep moving on. So I'm just going to say that covers H, I, and J, which was those approving the purchases of the truck. So the vehicles. So we'll move to K, discuss approving an ordinance enacting Act 57.
Earlier this year, the Pennsylvania House of Representatives and Senate passed Act 57, what Act 57 is, it requires that if a property owner can prove that they did not receive a tax bill, that they would be exempt from paying any penalties and interest on the tax bill. Act 57 also requires all municipalities to adopt this, so this is not optional. We have to adopt it. And basically where this comes into play is when people just buy a house and the tax bill goes to the old owner, old mortgage company, or people pay off their mortgage and they keep sending tax bills to the mortgage company, but they don't forward them to the property owners. So as long as they can prove that they did not receive the bill, basically by showing it went somewhere else, then we have to exempt the penalties and interest. So this has been advertised, and it can be adopted at next month's, and it has to be adopted by, or at the December 7th meeting. It has to be adopted by January 9th, as per the state statute.
Great. Any questions or comments about that discussion, that ordinance? Okay, and does this, because this is an ordinance, does it need to be advertised? Are we able to adopt it next week?
It was advertised. It was advertised last Wednesday.
Okay, great. Sorry, you may have already said that. I was focusing on something else. All right, so hearing nothing, let's move on to item L, which is discuss the proposed bamboo ordinance.
The bamboo ordinance goes back a few months that we asked that it be tabled because there were some concerns about the some of the wording in it. And basically, in going through the ordinance again, I found one word that was an issue. And the issue was under the definition of bamboo, the term fallopia was an issue. And what if you look online, running bamboo and other types of bamboo are the stuff with the stalk, that's 3/4 of an inch to an inch thick, and they have shallow roots that run basically across properties and cause damage to neighboring properties. The fallopia is more of a weed that grows pretty naturally, and if we start citing people for fallopia, we'll have to cite ourselves because there's a lot of it on our properties. We'll have to cite almost every property owner that has property adjacent to an alley, because it is very prevalent in Swissvale. But I don't think, well, I know it's not what when this was initially brought forth by some residents on the Hill with concerns about this, that's not what they were addressing. It was the more specific bamboo, more typical bamboo shoots rather than the fallopia. So what I'm proposing is just to remove the word fallopia from the ordinance and then adopt the ordinance. And then when there are complaints, we can investigate. And, if people planning it too close to property lines and, being invading in the property, the other properties and such, we can take action against them.
Great. Any comments or questions from council members?
Now, I'm just glad that this was brought back up because it was brought to my attention as well as Ms. Salisbury's attention that we never actually approved the ordinance. And I thought we approved it. I thought we approved it and we were moving forward, but obviously we did not. So thank you so much for bringing this back on the agenda for us to finish it.
And I did re-advertise it because of the length of time since it was initially advertised. I don't know if it was necessary or not, but it was just to be safe. So that if anybody challenges the ordinance, it was re-advertised 2 weeks ago, or last week. So it'll be 14 days till between adoption and advertisement, which the statute only requires 7.
So we can vote. This has been advertised. We can vote on it next week.
We can vote on it next week. Yes.
Okay, great. Anything else? All right, let's move to item M, discuss proposed lease agreement with Woodland Hills School District.
Just to bring everybody up to speed on this, the school board did take this off their agenda for November. I think it was November 16th. It was supposed to be voted on. They did remove it. Tried to talk to Dr. Castagna about it. And, today, well, a couple times we've been playing phone tag. Today we played phone tag 3 times. Unfortunately, the last time when I was talking to Mr. McTiernan when he called back and about the agenda tonight, and I was not able to touch base with him. It is on the agenda for the December 5th meeting, which is next Monday, for their action on it. One of the things was, though, one of the concerns I have is we do have the other issues with Ecotone, worm return, and 412 food rescue. Ecotone, I mean, they're kind of on their own to move the container up there if they want to go with us and to get their power attached with Miss Salisbury has told me now that they're looking at doing solar panels on the roof so they wouldn't have to even tie into the grid. So there's a lot of room where they could locate up there. 412 food rescue doesn't take a lot of room on that site. Even if they have 2 or 3 trucks and 4 to 6 crew members, we could just assign them an area. Here's your area to park. The one concern I have with worm return is the the area where we would be occupying, which is if you've been in the school or been up there, there's a ramp that goes up to the old office and guidance office area. That's the area we would be occupying there. And there's some restrooms there, a couple classrooms and that we would have the ability to use. Part of the problem though with worm return is they can't be in that area because the smell, the smell's bad. So we can't have them in the office area. Plus, their thing is they're washing buckets daily there, so they would have to be in the basement area or garage area or something. But the way the heating and air conditioning system is there, I was talking to Mr. Finney, who's their facilities director, was off this week, but I was talking to one of their head maintenance guy, and what he had told me, the way the systems are set up is the air conditioning and the heating are on the roof for the area we would be occupying. And we can shut down the rest of the building down to a minute to keep it at a minimal temperature so the pipes don't freeze. But if we have worm return in a separate part of the building, we're going to have to crank that up. There is going to be a cost associated with that, with the higher gas bill, higher electric bill, higher water bill. And, with us paying the utilities there, the problem is they don't have a zone system where it's just, okay, this takes care of this 200 square foot area. There's 2 boilers downstairs. Basically, one takes care of half the basement, the other one takes care of the basement, one takes care of the classrooms on the upper floor. So we would have to have the one in the basement turned up to accommodate them, plus whatever hot water heat. So there might be a significant cost for the borough to house worm return in that facility. And just wanted to get your feedback, of what you want to do with this, because there is a potential that them being there is going to cost us a significant amount of money.
Yes, Ms. Salisbury, go ahead.
Can I ask what significant is?
I don't know, but I mean, to fire a boiler, just we would be heating the entire basement of that school for their whatever little area that they take, where otherwise we would just keep it at a minimal temperature of 40 to 45 degrees to keep the pipes from freezing.
So if it's a cold weather issue. So once it warms up in the spring, it sounds like it would be a non-issue. Is that fair to say?
I would assume so, because it's it'll be through the winter and that, to the end of this winter and then through all of next winter.
Okay. So yeah, if we're sort of doing across the bridge as we come to it, definitely some portion of this winter, because we don't know yet when everybody's moving up to the school, right?
Well, no, because since the agreement hasn't been approved yet, we haven't made plans to move.
Yeah. I know you had mentioned you wanted to do some grading and that type of thing at some point.
Some grading?
Oh, you told me that you wanted the things out from behind the building because you wanted to do some work on that.
Property, yeah.
Yeah. So I know you would kind of like them out of there sooner rather than later. By them, I mean all 3 projects, like Ecotone and 412 and the Worm Return project, so that you'd have that space back, right?
Yeah, and we want to, if they approve this at the December 5th meeting, we were there today. There's a lot of cleaning that needs done. There's a lot of things that the school district needs to do before we can occupy it. Okay. They have made some repairs to the generator already, which was an issue, and they're putting a small fuel tank in outside. It is a diesel generator with an in-ground tank. So, but it gets water in it because of the way the tank was built 35 years ago. So they're replacing the diesel tank. So there's a number of things they need to do before we move in there. So I wouldn't anticipate us doing anything till after the 1st of the year now, because we're already being December 5th. And by the time they approve us. So the thing is, once we're out of the building, I want to get all the utilities shut off to the building, to our borough building, because there's no use paying all the fees, paying to heat it. But that time, Worm Return would have to leave once we're fully out of there too.
Right. So I guess the other question I have is, could we relocate them instead of going up to the school? Could we relocate them by the DPW building that we acquired, for the new, it hasn't been renovated yet, I know, but we've been using it.
Well, there's, the majority of their thing is inside.
Yeah,
There's not room inside for them because
Yeah.
it's a very messy operation. And I mean, they occupy 300 square feet, maybe 300 or maybe more of the DPW garage at the old building.
Mhm.
There's not 300 feet for them to use over there. Plus, we have millions of dollars of equipment. I'm not
Sure.
real comfortable with having people that don't work for the borough having keys to go in and out of that garage
Yeah.
on a daily basis without anybody being there.
Yeah, because if just for folks who are maybe unfamiliar with what they actually do in our property, we have the outdoor part, which I affectionately call the worm paddock. But it's outside. There's like a little chain link fence behind the borough building, and so that's where people can have buckets and things like that if they drop off food scraps. But likewise with Ecotone, there's that sort of stuff outside. But then the reason that Laura from Warm Return provides free composting to us, free, vermiculture to us as a borough, is that we let her rinse out buckets before she goes home. So instead of having to drive home with, dirty buckets of people's food scraps and stuff, and then rinse them out at her house, she rinses them out in the old DPW garage downstairs and behind, in the back of the borough building. She rinses them out there, and it's a convenience for her. And so as a sort of trade-off to the borough, she provides 25 households with free worm composting, which is normally a thing that she would charge for every month. So basically what the problem would be is we need a place that the water wouldn't freeze for her to be rinsing out those buckets, or that it wouldn't just, accumulate outside. Like in theory, could you just rinse them off in a field with a hose? Sure. But then the water would freeze, and also you'd have all of the food scrap debris in the, in the lot. So that's sort of the issue, is finding a possibility for where she can rinse things down a drain with water that isn't frozen. It's not just sort of the outdoor food scrap part.
And there's also about 500 buckets that are stored in the garage too. So that's
that can be moved. Yeah, that part can be moved. I think it's the water is the biggest issue. Yeah.
Ms. Scales, you have your hand up.
The only question I have is just me making sure I clearly understand in terms of the lease negotiations with the school. And I thought that with our 3 projects that are on our property, my understanding is that a separate lease would go to them. We would basically not have a sublease to them from our lease with the school. So I don't understand, why any sort of cost or anything associated with, our 3 projects leasing that space comes upon the borough, being that I was told we're not going to sublease, that they're just going to have their own separate, lease.
What Ms. Salisbury was told.
Yeah, I was just going to answer. Is that okay if I answer?
Yeah, please do.
So when I went up to the school board meeting and did sort of a brief presentation. Laura from Warm Return went with me, and I did sort of a brief presentation about what the projects are. And so when I spoke to some of the school board members, as well as the superintendent of schools prior to that meeting, to give them sort of a quick rundown, but I also showed up at the public meeting to have a conversation with them about it, similar to our public comment that we do here. So when I presented that, it was their preference that they consider it all one thing. Now, when we look at, 412 Food Rescue, for instance, it's just parking spaces and they have a zillion parking spaces up there. So it's not really anything you have to figure out. Ecotone has agreed they're going to pay, not just that they agreed, but they're contractually obligated with us, but they're going to pay for their own transportation up the hill. And so that's kind of going to get taken care of, and they won't need power and things because they are making that system self-sustainable. So like Mr. Bacci mentioned, it'll just have a system of solar panels on it. So it won't need electricity or anything. It can go wherever. The only one that's sort of an issue is the worm return one because of the water source that we need. But that was the school board's preference, or I should say it was the superintendent's preference, that it be sort of all part and parcel of the rental agreement. Because when we met that time, I remember I said the same thing, that I thought it would be easiest to do have these entities contract with the school system or school board rather, school district separately. So that the same way that they had done with us, but their preference is that they would be basically, it's all part of us moving up there. So we're moving the police department, we're moving 412 Food Rescue gets, parking spaces, like it's all part and parcel of the same agreement. That was their preference. And I don't think their solicitor wasn't there. I don't think the night that I was there. So I don't think it was something that their solicitor brought up. I think it was a superintendent's preference that they do it that way.
Okay, so that's why we're talking about all
Yeah.
the.
And there was another school board meeting between then and now, and I was going to attend that, and I was actually on my way over, and then I looked at their agenda and I realized they had taken it off the agenda. And I think it's because they hadn't had a chance to run it past their solicitor before the meeting. So it is rescheduled for discussion on the 5th, maybe. Yeah, the 5th at 7. So that's their I think that's their version of like their agenda discussion meeting. So they're going to do their review of that on the 5th.
Okay, so ultimately the delay is associated with figuring out how our 3 projects are going to fit into the lease.
And what I had suggested for ease of just getting it done is I said, why don't we just sign the agreement that we already have, which is, for our not fire, but police and admin and everything to go up there, because we already have that, that's done. So why don't you just sign that? And then we can do an addendum to that contract that would handle these 3 things. And I was sort of surprised to hear that they were kind of still having discussions, because last I heard everything was fine and it was getting signed and everything was okay. But they did not, I guess, again, their solicitor wasn't there, so they didn't have any input that I saw in front of me. But they did not want to do that. They just wanted to have it all be part and parcel of the same thing. But I mean, obviously I'm not their attorney. I probably would have just said, do the agreement you have now and then slap an addendum on it for the other projects, but that's not how they preferred to do it, I guess.
I think I think council though needs to make it clear, and I mean, I can reach out to them. I think we need to make it clear to them though, we need the space. And if they're apprehensive of having worm return in the building or other things on the property, they need to vote on us being there, and the other 3 organizations would have to find something on their own.
Yeah, and I'm happy to have that conversation with them. I can certainly reach out to the school board and to the superintendent and have that conversation over the next week. We have another week before they're going to meet. So I can definitely reach out to them and have that conversation. And I was planning on attending that meeting anyway, because to me, I think it does make sense to just get it taken care of as far as our office needs, because that's all hammered out.
Gotcha.
Ms. Alfonso Wells, you have your hand up.
Yes, of course, our office needs are the most important part of it, right? Because we have to have our employees have a place to be, particularly in the winter when we start all this. But I have a question, like if we're just washing food scraps and stuff down the drain, where is that going? I mean, I don't think, do we have like a food compactor or something attached to that drain? Otherwise, won't that drain get clogged at some level if you're throwing food and stuff down it? I mean, that's just the question. I mean, I know I don't throw stuff down my drains without the food compressor eating something up first. Otherwise, you have issues. Is that clogging drains?
They're actually they have a large blue tote that they use, and they skim the water off it and the water goes down the drain. But they basically, I think they're taking the scraps, whatever's left on there, and then they recompost them. So it's kind of,
Okay, so
kind of a zero
it's
waste
not
thing.
washing the.
No,
No,
the
it's
scraps
like,
out.
not to be gross, but it's kind of like if you have food sitting in a bucket for a week, there's like slime. Do you know what I mean? It's like they're rinsing the slime, and they're not like pushing banana peels down the drain. I know what you mean. Yeah.
Does that cause like an odor or something? Because that sounds disgusting. I mean, when I see things that have, let us say, propagated slime in like the refrigerator or some other location, I know it smells. So, I mean,
it's pretty disgusting.
Oh my God. So are we deodorizing or something? Is there some deodorizing taking place? Because that's kind of gross.
My understanding when I've been over there when they do it is that, they rinse it away, like they keep the water running and it rinses it away. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of, if you've ever left a Tupperware in your fridge for too long and had to like rinse it down the drain, it may smell a little bit in your kitchen. So yeah, it's not, that's why they're in the garage and not like in the borough offices.
Thank you.
Mr. Price, go ahead.
Sorry, I wasn't unmuted. As chair of the building committee, I'm just concerned that I'm so worried about this project, this multi-million-dollar project, and that our employees be relocated so that they can begin demolition of the building. And it stresses me to hear that, and concerns me to hear that we've lost a month with the school district over the relocation of the buckets of worms. I think it's a very noble project, and I think it's nice that we've helped them and provided a space for them temporarily. But I really do think we need to separate their project from our immediate needs of getting that building empty so that it can be demolished and we can get moving on this new building. Because each month that we delay, there's inflation, material costs keep going up, interest rates keep going up, and we have to keep moving.
All right, Mr. Price. Ms. Scales.
Yes, I'm sorry. I forgot to ask this question. Being that the school board has decided that they want to group everything all together, are they considering changing the price?
No.
Okay, good. That was it.
Ms. Salisbury.
So I just wanted to say I did not know that this was an issue still, because last I was told by the folks from the school board, because I'm in communication with some of the members of the school board, and last I spoke to the superintendent, everything was a-okay, and I was told we're good to go and we're going to sign it and everything's happy. So if somebody had told me, I definitely would have been working on this over the past, week or so, or however long. It's just nobody pointed out to me that there was this issue. So I would have tried to smooth it over and get it taken care of prior to this meeting so that it wasn't an issue for us to even have to deal with discussing, because I try to take care of things before I bring it to you guys so that I have things handled. So I just didn't know that it was an issue, this, extra cost thing or, any of that stuff. So what I would propose, if you guys are okay with me doing this, is that over the next week, I think I have, let me see, what do we have here? Well, not as long as I thought I had, but I have like maybe 5 days. I can have conversations with members of the school board. I can have a phone call with Dr. Castagna. I can also see if we can separate those two issues like we originally discussed, so that like Mr. Price very rightly mentioned, we want to get the office stuff hustling and not get it held up by the ancillary projects. So I can definitely see if we can get that moving along. And I haven't been looped in on any discussions as far as, the school district solicitor and our solicitor working on getting language hammered out on that. I wasn't included in any of those conversations. So I can definitely work on over the next few days getting that hammered out so that it is taken care of and we are ready to move on, you know, in the new year and whenever everybody decides to move up there, because I think we do need to get that contract taken care of. Is that okay? Would that be all right with you if I did that?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'd like to request that this, personally, this is just my perspective, that the school board, I know they said they wanted to group us together, but I'd rather us do that separately, especially as we're talking about a different space than what we're originally planning. You know, like Worm Return was originally, is going to be using a different space that was originally planned for the borough to use, that they're going to have to tie into utilities. Like, we shouldn't be responsible for the utilities. I mean, Worm Return is a for-profit corporation. Ecotone is not, or I don't know what Ecotone is. They're like a foreign corporation is what they're listed on.
It's a benefit corporation. Yeah.
Okay. But 412 Food Rescue is a nonprofit. And I think I love the idea of us being an incubator for these small businesses, nonprofits, but there's also a point where, you know, we're talking about, you know, this multi-million-dollar building and, you know, interest rates, all those things going up. And I just I don't think we should be responsible for footing the bill for Worm Return's business.
Yeah, and that's why we had sort of that, you know, barter system, if you will, of you will do, because she normally, it's Shady Side Worms is another one that people use for this, where you basically pay a fee every month and then they would come and pick up the bucket from your door and give you a fresh one and that sort of thing. So it's become kind of like I don't want to say trendy, but it's like sort of a current thing that some people do if they don't want to compost in their backyard. So we kind of did that trade-off of, hey, we'll give you, you know, we weren't like going to, you know, it's just a garage that was sort of sitting there. And so we said, sure, you can use the hose if you want to do a 25 household project. That's fine. It's kind of like a even trade. Nobody really loses or gains anything. So I agree. My original belief, like I said, was that we should have that sort of in a separate agreement. And I just have never been, you know, the informal conversations that I had on the phone with Dr. Castagna and various school board members, I was always told, yep, everything's fine. We're going to vote on it. Sounds good. So until literally this meeting, I had never been told that there was any kind of problem going on with it. So if I had been told, I would have worked on it. But let me convey that to them. Maybe I can set up a meeting that's a little bit more formal than having a phone conversation so that we can hammer out, you know, let's separate this out and just focus on the underlying agreement that we were going to have for the police and the admin offices and so forth. And then we can handle the other things separately.
Yeah, I'd be feel better about that. And even, I mean, I think Greg is the borough manager should probably be in some of those conversations too.
Sure. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's very important for him to know what's going on in that regard.
Yeah, because I wonder if the conversations I have, I'm just being told sort of like, yeah, everything's great. And then they're like, okay, we'll bring up any problems with Greg. I don't know.
So yeah. Any problems up with me. I talked to Dr. Castagna the day of the vote about 3:30 p.m. and he said seems like everything's good, everybody's in favor of it.
Yeah.
And then I didn't find out till the next day when you had called me and said they took it off the agenda. So
yeah.
And
yeah, because I actually spoke to a school board member like 10 minutes before the meeting was supposed to start, when I was literally going over there and getting ready to, you know, park and go in and sit there. And they said, oh yeah, I guess it's not on our agenda tonight. I'm not sure why. Let me ask why. And then next thing I was told is, oh yeah, everything's fine and dandy and we're going to be voting on it again. So let me see if I can I don't want to eat up the whole meeting with, no pun intended, with worm. But I we'll meet separately about that and see if we can get it hammered out so that's not a problem.
Great. Thank you for that. Any other comments about this lease agreement with Woodland Hills? Okay, let's move on to the next item. Item N, discuss proposed anti-discrimination ordinance and formation of a human relations commission.
Thank you so much. So I took into consideration some of the suggested revisions to the ordinance. So one of the changes that I added on here is if there is a finding that a violation has occurred, that what will happen is the Human Relations Commission will submit to council basically a request to fine. So rather than the Human Relations Commission issues the fines, they would submit it to council for council to basically vote and approve on a fine. That is one of the changes that I made. Mr. McTiernan, I shared it with him and he reviewed it just to make sure we're in compliance with the existing laws and there's no cause for concern in terms of liability. And he actually beefed it up some more for us. And he provided definitions for age, disability, and accessibility. And those definitions are in alignment with the current law, discrimination laws. So he added that as well. One of the suggestions that was made is for our definition in terms of crimes. So there is in this anti-discrimination ordinance that an employer cannot discriminate on the basis of criminal history, but there's an exception for crimes against children, murder, and rape. Those are not a part of the criminal history that's at play here. One of the suggestions that was made is that we align the definition with the current crimes code definition in terms of criminal history for employers. And more so to add on there that another exception would be for misdemeanors and felonies, primarily because the way as drafted, an employer cannot consider theft or fraud as a basis to not hire. And me and the DEI committee have talked about this, and the good news is that, hey, I practice criminal defense. So I have a really good understanding in terms of the crimes that one is charged with that can arise to the level of a felony. And a lot of times those crimes are not crimes against persons. A lot of times the individuals who walk away with a felony or a misdemeanor may be out of the fear of going to jail and just choosing a plea deal for the sake of not going to jail. And I know that one of the concerns of us as a council as a whole is that at the very least, there was protections for individuals who are victims of really harmful crimes like murder, rape, and crimes against children. So I'm not of the opinion that we should broaden this definition to include as an exception misdemeanors and felonies. I am comfortable and in support of the definition only having an exception for crimes that are against children, murder, and rape. But I at the very least wanted to be transparent with all of council to know that that was a recommendation. The DEI committee has actually considered that when we were drafting the ordinance, and we decided that there's a group of individuals who will not be protected, who should be protected simply because they have a misdemeanor or a felony on their record.
Well, a question about that. Because I don't understand how, personally, I don't even know the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony entirely. I don't know that I could explain that to you. But, let's just say someone was accused of fraud or, some kind of like embezzlement. Let's just say embezzlement in there. Does that mean they could apply for a job to be an accountant of a business in Swissvale and that previous embezzlement could not be used against them? Because, shouldn't that kind of disqualify them if they have shown in their past that they have not necessarily been faithful to the job that they were supposed to do? Can you speak to that a little bit? Because I want to make sure that our businesses are protected as well, that they're not forced to hire someone that might be a poor fit because of certain decisions that the individual may have made.
Well, embezzlement, I do believe, arise to the level of a felony.
Okay.
So being that there is no exception for crimes that arise to the level of a misdemeanor or a felony, that would not be basically a criminal history that an employee can basically be discriminated against. So just from the presentation and some of the information that was shared with us by Ciora with Sisters in terms of the issues that our LGBTQIA, specifically our trans community, face with discriminatory practices, it relates to housing. But we need an anti-discrimination ordinance that broadens the scope for not just housing, but for accessibility, public access, employment, and so if we want to consider some type of protection specifically for employers, not for landlords, not for owners of properties, not for owners of the businesses that provide these public accommodations, then there is the opportunity. I still do not suggest that we put in here an exception for misdemeanors and felonies, but if the concern is acts of theft or fraud, that you specifically put that. There is some language that Mr. McTiernan suggested, but the crux of what the concern is as it relates to the crimes code that puts that level of protection there for employers, it is theft, fraud, investment, those sort of acts as it relates to employers. So rather than broadening the scope by just putting misdemeanors and felonies, if we want to just have additional protections there for our businesses, then just put in there as an exception, this does not relate to crimes related to theft or fraud under the employer section.
I'd be in favor of that personally.
And, if I can add something as well, I spoke to Bob earlier today, and he said basically what you said, Ms. Scales, but to sort of broaden on that, what the state law provides is that you can't discriminate against a potential employee based on past crimes, except for if those past crimes relate to the job in question. So your example, Mr. Ansel, regarding an accountant who had been convicted of, bribery or something like that, or embezzlement, that would go to the job they're being hired for. So an employer would be allowed under the state law to take that into account in terms of hiring, and it would not be discriminatory, even though it might be based on a past crime. So that's what the state law says. And I think that was Bob's thought, is that, should there be some exception, or should the exception sort of align with the state law that is not just limited to murders, rape, or crimes against children, but any crime that could be potentially related to the job function and job responsibilities.
Thank you, Mr. Mangelo. Ms. Salisbury.
So I guess I'm concerned about imposing upon council this quasi-judicial obligation or role. For instance, we have like under findings, this is in those cases alleging a violation of this ordinance, the commission may submit a recommendation to council to assess a civil penalty against the respondent in an amount not exceeding $500 per violation. I've mentioned before, the state has this. I've practiced before the Pennsylvania Human Rights Commission. this is a duplicative effort. And I want to say, I agree with everything that's in this. I don't think that people should be discriminated against for any of these things. But I am very concerned at creating duplicative efforts when I know, because I've had these conversations with people who work there, that the PAHRC itself is, they are trained in mediation. They are mostly attorneys. They are people who are not, lay people trying, and no disrespect, but, I'm concerned about someone who doesn't know the difference between a felony and a misdemeanor, making a quasi judicial determination and imposing monetary fines on people. Because, we happen to have lawyers on council, but not everybody on council is a lawyer or is ever going to be, because we won't all be on council forever. And I just have a real concern that we are creating an unnecessarily duplicative system over what already exists at the state level, with a funded office of people who are well-educated, well-trained, do this every day professionally. They have mediators, they have practitioners, they have a process for how lawyers are engaged. And when you are counsel representing someone who's either been accused or is accusing, and I just feel that a 1 square mile borough is taking on a lot of obligation to enforce something like this. I feel like it would be more proper if we had an ordinance that then, if you wanted to assert that a violation occurred, you could take it to the magistrate, which is a properly judicial body, as opposed to a legislative body like the council. So I just feel like there's some mixing of things going on. I mean, I have a variety of concerns with some of the language, but to me, that's the biggest thing, is the duplication of effort. Because I'm generally against creating multiple unnecessary layers of things that already exist, because you could, for instance, find yourself, having to defend against this, or, confused about, do I go to Swissvale? Should I go to the PAHRC? There's too much going on, in my opinion, and I don't want to make Swissvale responsible for something that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has a hard enough time staffing and keeping funded and maintained, but it's supposed to be sort of, free for us to kind of provide as a service. Some of the other things that I'm concerned about is on page 2, there's a disclaimer that it's not to endorse any particular lifestyle. When I hear the word lifestyle, I hear that as kind of like my spidey sense goes off for mentioning someone who is LGBTQIA. And it's sort of a thing that people say, well, I don't, if they want to choose that lifestyle or something like that. And it just rubs me the wrong way. I'm just a little bit, it's just one of those, I'm being picky, I know, but it's one of those things where when people say, well, if they want to choose that lifestyle, and I feel like it just really, it's a little bit, it comes across, I think a lot of times that word is homophobic to people. I just want to be careful about that. I want to make sure that when we talk about guide or support animals, we include that people have other types of emotional support animals. I'm not talking about anything silly. Like a few years ago, someone talked about bringing their emotional support turkey on an airplane. And, I'm not talking about that, but people do have things like cats or what have you. And so there are other types of emotional support animals and different types of, trained animals. But moreover, I don't want to get too in the weeds of looking at the language of this. I just worry that we're putting the onus on council to engage in a behavior that in my mind should go to the magistrate, should go to the PAHRC, should go to some judicial body as opposed to a legislative or an executive one.
And Ms. Salisbury, I don't want to speak out of turn for Ms. Scales, but she and I had talked about this whenever it was first being introduced. And one of the questions that I had was similar about this. If this is the same thing that the PHRC already does, why are we doing this? And Ms. Scales' response was that there is, it can take a lot of time to get resolution from the PAHRC. And the desire was to have something that was a little bit quicker and a little bit more efficient in that. Now, I hadn't thought about the magistrate. I don't know if maybe that is an option. I understand your concern with the legislative versus a true judicial perspective. But I just wanted to kind of speak to share, at least again, to put words in Ms. Scales that she had communicated to me, is the desire was to have a more expedited process so that people aren't waiting a year to get resolution from the PAHRC. So I just to throw that out there.
Thank you for that clarity, Chris. Yeah, so I think what we should be more concerned of is victims of discriminatory acts that are taking place in our municipality. And when it comes to seeking resolution or some type of assistance from the PHRC, it could take a very long time. And so, and when we're talking about the judicial system, not everyone can afford an attorney. Not everyone feels confident to walk into the magistrate and file a complaint and know how to even file a complaint. So this is not a duplicative efforts. What it is a means for victims of discriminatory acts. So I understand there's a concern about duplication, but what we should be concerned about is the well-being of our employees and our residents who frequent in Swissvale, who are subject to discriminatory acts. That should be a cause for concern for us. We don't even have an anti-discrimination ordinance, let alone some type of relief in place for those who are victims, true victims, that don't have the financial resources, that don't have the connections to figure out in terms of which process to go to. And if they do figure it out, in terms of what to do while they're still suffering from discrimination. The good news is that you guys are dealing with a council member that has handled cases that have gone before the PHRC. And you're dealing with a council member who have handled cases that have gone before the local magistrate. I, for one, know that an individual who is subject to these sort of crimes, basically, cannot receive the recovery nor the assistance that they need through these two means. Now, by us creating this ordinance and this commission, it does not stop them from also seeking recovery through the PHRC or through the judicial system. They can still go that route. But this is also a route for those who are subject to discrimination and can get some type of assistance and a listening ear within a quicker means of time. Yes, I understand with PHRC, we're dealing with folks who are well-trained, have the knowledge, the skill to mediate and oversee those types of claims. But as Mr. Price noted, we have a judicial system right now that has folks come in during jury trials to listen and hear the facts and be told what the law is, and they determine whether or not somebody is innocent or guilty. So I'm very confident that 5 members of our community has the competency to hear the facts, understand what the rules are as they've been instructed they are, and submit to council whether or not a fine should be assessed to someone who is abusing our residents or our employees through acts of discrimination. And with the mention about lifestyle, I don't know specifically what you're noting in there, but one thing about this anti-discrimination ordinance is a protection for all individuals that are of a protected class. So it covers race, but it also does include our LGBTQIA community as well. It includes our disabled residents and employees, and it also includes our elderly as well. So in terms of if you have a cause for concern with the language, then please note that, please definitely send that my way and Mr. McTiernan way, and we'll take a look at it. But with this ordinance, what we tried to take into consideration is the current laws that are in play in terms of these definitions. We also took into consideration other municipalities who have put into place an anti-discrimination ordinance, as well as a human relations commissions that is actively running. So a lot of this language is in place to protect those who need it.
Would it be okay
Mr.
if I just clarified one thing? So I just want to make sure I'm not misunderstood.
Sure.
I'm
Is it about, yeah, go ahead.
100% in favor of the ordinance. So I consider this two things, right? So there's the ordinance and the Human Relations Commission. If you wanted me to vote on the ordinance right now, I'll vote yes. Like I know we're not at a voting meeting, but if we put that up for a vote, yes, 100%. The only thing I'm concerned about is the Human Rights Commission. So I just wanted to make that clear. I'm not opposing in any way the ordinance.
Mr. Mraz, I know you've been waiting a long time. Real quick, I just want to say, just to throw out as another option to think about, because what I'm hearing, what I heard from Ms. Salisbury was who gets to make the determination. And what I heard from Ms. Scales is the element of advocacy and support. And just one other thing to throw out there is if we did create a Human Relations Commission that can hear these and make recommendations, they could also be an advocacy group that could help people. Again, if we wanted to go to the magistrate path, could help people, with the know how to file to make that, how to show up, what to do. So that's just that could be another option where we still have this commission, but would take the judicial element away from council and put it back into the local judicial system, but have that advocacy group. So Mr. Miser, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And a lot of points have already been made that, raise some of my questions and whatnot. And I, for the record, am fully in support of an anti-discrimination ordinance and providing support to our residents for finding the proper channels to address acts of discrimination. But, and it's been mentioned, I do have concerns about something that would come to the council for imposing a fine. I just don't, I don't know if that's, and Ms. Scales can maybe tell me if that's being done in other smaller municipalities where council are voting on fines for acts of discrimination as opposed to going through state, other agencies that are already equipped to handle that. And
Yeah,
if so,
we're actually limiting it, honestly, because what those other municipalities have done, they've empowered the Human Relations Commissions to actually take action. So we, by changing the language to say that they would actually submit to council to issue the fine, we're actually limiting their powers versus what the other municipalities are doing. They are actually empowering the Human Relations Commissions to take the necessary actions if they determine that a violation has occurred.
Yeah, I mean, I almost feel, assuming that the commission members are well versed in what constitutes discrimination and things along those lines, I'm almost more prone to want to put that power in the commission's hand rather than a council that is elected. That could be 7 people. Who knows, in the future of our borough, what this council will look like, and if the council will have any understanding of what is discrimination or what, and I know we're trying to define that in the ordinance, but I do, and Chris kind of spoke to this, I do have concerns about us labeling discrimination differently than what's already established at the state level. So, for instance, we were talking about the employer issue where, it sounds like right now the state does have protections in place for the employer where if the criminal history is pertinent to the job that they are applying for, it can be used to determine whether they can be employed. And at least from what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Scales, you're looking to maybe make it a little bit tighter here where certain things could not be used, even if it is pertinent to the job. And those are the areas where I have concerns. I am fully in support of us having a commission and having an ordinance to assist our residents who are the victims are the important parties in this discussion. And I think they need to have all resources available to them. But I do have concerns about how then the action is taken on the council side, and B, that we're not putting employers in our borough in a bad place, just to echo Chris's thoughts.
Yeah, I understand, Josh, your concerns there. And where the differences lies is, I don't know if you remember, and Bill, I'm going to get I see your hand. Sorry. I don't want to wait to the end for everybody's comments and then I forget what what type of response that I wanted to give to address the concerns that are being raised. So the difference in the definitions and where that concern arises from is there is a state law that was recently enacted. I don't know if you guys remember from the presentation that Ciora provided to us with the actual statute that's in place. There's a new Pennsylvania statute that has been put into place that basically forbids acts of discrimination on the basis of criminal history. So that statute, it's separate from the crimes code that Mr. McTiernan is mentioning. And so what we did for the DEI committee is that we took into consideration concern for crimes against people and children, because in the current statute that was enacted that forbids discrimination on the basis of a criminal history, it does not make an exception for crimes against children, murder, or rape. So that is why there is specifically an exception for those crimes. There was no exception for employers on the basis of any sort of acts of fraud or theft, because that is not even an exception that is mentioned in the current law that's basically in place. So I understand the concern. Definitely someone who managed a business of her own in terms of, hiring someone that may have a criminal past that goes against some of the, responsibilities of the actual job description. That is something that I'm willing to consider for the employer section, but not to make an exception overall. And just to be clear, I want to shy away from putting any sort of language that makes an exception for misdemeanors and felonies, because of the simple fact, if you're dealing with folks that are suffering from homelessness, there may be some misdemeanors or felonies on their background associated with some of the socioeconomic issues that they're facing at that time. So just to be clear on that end, I'm not proposing to put the language of misdemeanors or felonies, but I am acceptable to the recommendation that has been made as relates to employers. And
Price.
Bill.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry,
Bill.
I thought you were
Sorry.
done.
Yeah, sorry, Bill.
Okay. I had originally brought up the need for an ordinance a couple years ago when I first got on council. And the reason is some of the anti-discrimination laws were written in the 1960s. And they don't address certain things like gender identity, or in some cases, who a person is attracted to. And because of the gaps in the state and federal laws, some municipalities, a couple in Western Pennsylvania and hopefully Swissville, have been passing ordinances to try to protect people because some of the old statutes fall short. So the intent is not to be duplicative, but just the opposite, to fill up these holes where there isn't protection against, say, discriminating against someone because they're transgender, for example. Now, once we got into this and also listening to Ciora's presentation, we've started to try to broaden the ordinance to also cover other areas. But the origin of this was to patch up holes that aren't where people aren't provided protection statewide or nationally. And I think that it should be pointed out that Washington this week, Congress this week, has been trying to patch up holes because the Supreme, the whole issue of gay marriage and whether or not those marriages can continue to be allowed, and the risk that the Supreme Court may change that. Congress this week was trying to pass protections so that people that can still have same-sex marriages, or that if they have a same-sex marriage in Minnesota, that marriage must be recognized in the state of Illinois. So that's the whole goal behind this. Is it's not duplicative. It is to try to fill holes where there isn't protection. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Price. Ms. Alfonso Wells.
Thank you. I would say that one of the reasons we thought this was so important was because a lot of people don't have redress, right? This is something that it takes a long time for people to be able to adjudicate, for people to be able to get any response to. And we're trying to make efforts to address it. The status quo is unacceptable, right? The default of not doing nothing is unacceptable. If in 2022, we have to make an ordinance at the federal level, so that not only LGBTQIA marriages can be recognized, but interracial marriages. I mean, really, this is 2022. And this is what, because that's the other part of it that no one's necessarily talking about. But the fact that they could have negated interracial marriages. This is 2022. Who in the world is going to sit there, except for some bigoted person, and say that, oh my gosh, it's an interracial marriage, you shouldn't have it? I think it's ridiculous, right? But the status quo and the default of doing nothing is also unacceptable, right? So we have to have and be bold, right? We have to be bold and say, we're going to do something, right? This is not going to fill the gaps of everything, but it is a start. It is a way for us to go forward. It is a way for us to be on the vanguard and saying, yes, we do not accept the default. We do not accept the status quo. We think things should be better. And this is a move to make it better, because just relying on everyday people to continue to do what's right obviously doesn't work, right? So, but I think everybody here has expressed the concerns that they do want to go forward, right? I hear lots of concerns in terms of what everybody is saying. We just want to make it right. We can't make it perfect, unfortunately, because we're not perfect people, right? And so the best we can do is the thing that we have hammered out over a long period of time. Believe me, Mrs. Scales has talked about this in meeting for a long period of time. Mr. Price has done likewise. They are both very passionate advocates. Not that I'm not, because I am, but they talk about it in legalese. And I am the one non-lawyer that is on the committee. Sadly for me, right? Because they can get involved in a lot of legalese. So please do not subject me to more legalese from my comrades, right? Because my colleagues are wonderful and they're very passionate about this issue. But if I have to go back to the weeds, it is not going to work very well. What we have finally hammered out that the three of us could agree on has taken us a long time. Let us start the process. Let us get it on the books. We can always massage it and work it out and do other things to tweak it later. You know, it's not gonna be immediate. It's not like tomorrow we're gonna have a commission. Not at all. It's not like next week after we vote on it, the week after there's gonna be a commission. Not at all, right? So we do have time to keep fixing and massaging it. But in the meantime, this is what three brilliant minds, I include myself in that brilliant mind, by the way, three brilliant minds have come up with that we are trying to press forward. And I think that we shall be able to address some of the other issues, but you have to move forward. We can't just let it lie. We are one of the communities that doesn't have anything. And that has been something in the communities that are surrounding us. That is something that people are looking to us as, the shining example of making change and doing things better than we've done them before. So I hope that would help us to hopefully go forward so that, I understand this is not the perfect. It is not perfect, but it's the best we could come up with to make sure that all different angles were being addressed. And believe me, Ms. Scales and Mr. Price were addressing all of those issues in a whole lot of meetings, right? So if we can actually go forward from here, I think it will get better as we keep going forward. And that's it.
Thanks, Ms. Alfonso Wells. I'm not gonna say the opposite by any means. I think you're absolutely right. There is consensus, I think a unanimous consensus that this is something that we want to do, we feel is necessary. I think some of the tweaks what I've heard tonight are questions about, determination, like who gets to make that determination. I kind of felt bad for Ms. Scales because Mr. Miser was saying, well, I'd rather put it in the hands of the Human Relations Commission, which is the opposite of what I had said last month, which, Ms. Scales, I think, addressed to kind of give it to council. We talked about the magistrate. We talked about some of these things. And just for the record, I'm going to end this conversation wherever we're at 9 o'clock because we've devoted a lot of time of this meeting to this. So that gives us another 8 minutes. But I will also say, I think we're getting closer to it. I just don't know that we're there yet. It was brought up, Senate Bill 912, and I kind of pulled it up just to look at it real quickly. This is the one that Ciora had mentioned that we gave a stamp of approval on. And as far as I read it, again, I'm not a lawyer, but this seems to be specifically focused around issues of housing, of tenants. It doesn't take into consideration language of employers. And so I do think that state law of employers, those protections should be in this ordinance. I do think that's important because we want to protect people's rights, but we also want to ensure that people's businesses and livelihood are protected as well. So I think that you guys remember how long it took us to deal with chickens and bees, and this is clearly something far weightier. You could argue it needs to be done more quickly because of the subject matter, but I also think that we need to make sure that we're getting it right because of the as we said, the victims. So I am all in favor of expediting this to the best of our ability, but the other 4 members of council that were not on the DEI committee, we first saw this a month ago, and I think that we're getting closer. I just personally don't think that we're quite there yet.
I understand your concerns, Chris, but we can address the employer issue by adding the recommended language from Mr. McTiernan. You, me, and Bill, we're now going into our 3rd year, and there's still no anti-discrimination ordinance. There's nothing. There is nothing. So imagine how long folks that are victims of discriminatory acts have not been getting any sort of redress nor protections from the Borough of Swissvale. This was brought to our attention years ago. We have put in the work. I have shared this document with you guys, and I've watched you guys pass things that are less important.
Yes, that's my point. This is important, and so I think it requires a sound judgment, investigation, all of these things. No one is arguing with the importance of this. You could say
you want to delay it.
No, I'm not trying to delay. I'm not trying to delay it, Ms. Scales. If you say we've been talking about this for 3 years, and we have been talking about it, but the DEI committee put forth a recommendation to council for our consideration and deliberation a month ago. So we haven't been looking at this for 3 years. So that's
Can I
just
ask a quick question?
We've been working on it for years. Just 1 second, Abigail.
Sure.
We've been working on it for years, taking into consideration the concerns of everyone involved in terms of how this ordinance will roll out. So the work that we've been putting in for years is this draft. The only thing that Mr. McTiernan suggested in terms of a protection for employers is that language that was just stated, which is not language that specifically say an exception for misdemeanors and felonies, but it was an exception basically for crimes that basically are related to the actual job that the employee is being considered for. That's the only suggestion he made. He
Yes.
looked at it overall and said it was fine. He added the 3 additional definitions to give it a little bit more beef and clarity. The only thing that was outlined is whether or not to add that additional language in the employer section. So I don't see a need to table this once again for you guys to have it sitting in your inboxes for a month, and then at an agenda setting meeting say, oh, I'm uncomfortable with language.
Is the DEI committee going to add that language about employer?
I'm fine with that.
Okay, I'm fine with that too then.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. It doesn't hinge on housing. It doesn't hinge on public accommodation. It's specifically an additional protection for our employers. And it specifically relates to, the job that they're being interviewed for versus putting, an exception for misdemeanors and felonies. So I'm fine with that, and I'm amicable to it. So we're still meeting the needs of, our residents and our fellow employees who are suffering from discriminatory acts, because I can assure you it's happening, because it's happening in the world. So Swissville is not exempt.
So I have no problem in adding that language. I mean, I think that's great. I'm just expressing that was a concern that I had heard, that I had shared, and I had heard other people share other concerns. Let's move to Mr.
Yeah, I just want to let you know, Chris, I'm not mad at you about that. I'm glad that you expressed it, because I'm pretty sure you're not the only one with that concern. So the fact that you were able to voice it so that I can address it, thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Price.
I've had my little yellow hand up for so long, I almost forget what I was going to say. I kind of wish that the public could see the little hands so that they could see which of us respectfully wait our turns and which of us get stepped on. But let's say that someone is transgender and is discriminated against and denied a job or an apartment. I don't think that state or federal law is going to help them at this point. I don't know that the statutes are written broad enough for that. And that's why we're trying to work on a local statute. And I think that the idea is to try to resolve these issues in the community inexpensively and informally. And I think that we could have a panel that could hear a matter like this, a simple matter like whether or not someone was denied an apartment because they were transgender. It's not rocket science to get a group of people up to speed to make that kind of call. After all, we routinely call people down for jury duty and have them make life and death decisions in murder trials. But the hope is that if we could have some place that a discriminated resident can go to locally, that maybe it can evolve into some kind of a collaboration or mediation and resolve the problem. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Ms. Stribling, go ahead.
I just had a question. I think you helped me answer it. What it would take to kind of move the envelope. They both, and I want to thank the DEI committee for actually doing the work on this, because it is something important. If you can't identify with it, then maybe it's not as urgent to you. But just imagine an individual that you know who might be discriminated against based on their right to be who they are. And it has nothing to do with lifestyle. It's not a lifestyle. It's what they're born into. So with these discriminations, that can be vital to somebody's existence. So I'm in full support of this initiative, and I hope we can move forward as soon as possible, because 3 years is a long time, because there could be someone out there who really is in a way, and we voted a shorter time period for things that are not as important. So I just want to know what it would take from those who are opposed to it to see what we can do to actually move this expeditiously.
Mr. Ben, I think that's a great question. Ms. Salisbury, why don't you go ahead and say what you're going to say, and then if anyone wants to respond to Ms. Stribling with her specific request briefly, go ahead.
So it dawned on me that we had another conversation earlier in this same meeting about how to move one thing along, maybe without moving the other thing along. When we were talking about, the ancillary projects versus the contract for the borough building, admin staff and police and things moving up to the school to be. I wonder, and this is the question I wanted to ask earlier, is it possible, is it reasonable to expedite the ordinance portion? Because what I hear from people over and over again, what I'm getting is that everybody likes the ordinance idea. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, but from listening to everybody, it sounds as if everybody likes the ordinance idea, but where we're dithering and talking and figuring things out is the commission part of the idea. Is it possible to bifurcate this and just do the ordinance and make sure that we have that now? And that way it's passed, it's done, it's taken care of, that's decided. And people could go to the magistrate, people could, do whatever they wanted to do with that. But then we can figure out what we want to do with the commission thing, but that gets the ordinance done. Because you are caught in this sort of catch-22. I appreciate what Mr. Ansel was saying earlier, where it's so important you want to spend a lot of time on it, but it's so important you want to get it done. So you don't want to keep spending a lot of time on it. So is that possible to divide this thing in half and approve the ordinance? Because I feel like everybody's for the ordinance idea.
No, because from my understanding, with the concerns raised by Chris and Josh, they don't have an issue with the Human Relations Commission. They had an issue with the ordinance not having protections there for employers. And whether or not this ordinance, includes some of those protections. And from Josh's perspective, his only question is rather than council being the one to assess the fine, can we just let the Human Relations Commissions issue the fine? So it sounds to me it's more so the language, not the Human Relations Commission. They come as a two-party package. So I'd like for us to move forward with approving the overall ordinance and not separate the two, because the Human Relations Commission is incorporated into this ordinance.
And just for the record, with that addition of language that Mr. McTiernan said, I am on board with the ordinance in that way. All right. Mr. Miser, did you want to respond to Ms. Stribling?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and again, reiterate, because, I know emotions can run high, but I think it should be, and I'm confident in saying this, that every single person on this council is in full support of something being done. I don't think there's anyone here that goes, oh, it's fine, just let the state handle. I don't think anybody's saying that. And with that, I'm fully prepared to vote in favor of this moving forward. I just wanted to understand how locked in we are to the wording. If we vote next Wednesday, is this all locked down, done? Here's how it is, and here's how it's going to be. Or do we have some room to kind of, because to Miss Alfonso Wells' point, none of us here are perfect. And there's going to be things that need to be tweaked and adjusted along the way to make sure that this is truly the best, that it can be. And so I just wanted to make sure that we had the ability to adjust that as we need to, while still keeping the wheels moving, and let this, let the fruits of your 3-year labor pay off and start moving this forward.
So I'll say this, is that we can't vote on this next week because it is an ordinance. It needs to be advertised, and that waiting period has to happen before we vote on it. So maybe a suggestion would be, again, I'm on board with that, with some modified language, that we begin the advertisement process so that timeline starts, to keep it moving, to Ms. Stribling's point, to keep expediting it, keep it moving forward. I'm guessing, and Mr. Batchy, maybe you can correct me, or Mr. Mangelo on this, based on our conversation about bamboo, the reason that it was re-advertised was not because we changed the language by removing fallopia, but because there had been such a gap in time between the two. So is that correct, Mr. Batchy?
Yeah, that's why I re-advertised it. It had been 3 or 4 months, so just to make a new notification.
So I'm gonna guess then by extrapolation, if we advertise this and make subtle shifts, not oversweeping changes to the ordinance, but if there is a little bit of tweaking here and there over the next few weeks, that could be done and still fall under the requirement of our advertising before we vote. Is that an accurate statement?
Well, if the next public meeting is January 4th, where it could be adopted at that point, it has to be so based upon the Valley Mirror's advertising schedule. We could advertise it on 25th, 4th, 3rd, December 22nd, which gives us 3 full weeks to get the language where everybody's comfortable with it. Then advertise it December 22nd, and then it's valid for adoption on January 4th.
How does everyone feel about that? That way we start this process, we prepare it for advertisement, have that deadline of December 22nd, and that gives us a few weeks to just refine some of those language. Okay, I see a thumbs up, I see some heads shaking or nodding. I guess it would be nodding. So okay, well, there we go. Let's move forward with that. I mean, yeah, let's keep chatting about those things, about some of those revisions. Make sure you let Ms. Scales know and the DEI committee know. Wonderful. Well, I meant to lower my hand. Thank you for bearing with us in that. I know that was a lot and a lot of hard work that the DEI committee has put together. Let's move to item O, discuss setting the meeting schedule for 2023. Mr. Batchy.
The meeting schedule would be for the same last Wednesday for the agenda meeting, first Wednesday for the council meeting. With the exception of April, the first day of Passover falls in the evening of April 5th. So I would propose we move that to April 3rd, as we've done in the past. If we had to move it, we moved it to the preceding Monday. But other than that, our schedule would be the same. Wednesday, 2 Wednesdays in a row, first and last, for the remainder of the year.
Any comments or questions about that? Yes, go ahead, Ms. Salisbury.
I just wanted to say thank you for reaching out to me and asking about Passover, because usually people like wait until we're in the meeting and then I have to say the meeting is on Yom Kippur or something. So thank you for being proactive and asking me about that.
Sure thing. Absolutely. Yeah, when I was looking at it, I went and I checked all the holidays that I could. I may have missed one, but hopefully we're good. Okay, let's move on then to item P, discuss board and commission. Oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that I'm very glad we're taking this into consideration every time, right? It shouldn't just be once, it should be all the time, because we also have citizens that are also Jewish that celebrate these things, and maybe they want to look at a council meeting too. And I'm so glad that we're not being so focused on just one particular religious observation, but that we are being more open to seeing other things, not other things, but specifically Judaism and other types of celebrations as meaningful, not only to council, but also to our citizenry. So I'm very happy that we're doing this, and I hope that this continues and it's not just a one-off or anything. Very important.
Okay, thanks for the comments, Ms. Alfonso Wells. Okay, let's move to item P, discuss board and commission appointments for 2023.
At the end of 2022, there are a number of seats on boards and commissions expiring, which are 2 on the planning commission, 1 on the zoning hearing board, 1 on civil service, 2 on the Shade Tree Commission, 1 on the Wilkinsburg Penn Joint Water Authority Board representative expires, 2 on the Recreation Advisory Committee, and there's also an open seat that has 3 years remaining on it, so 3 total on recreation, and 1 on the Steel Valley Authority. So I would propose that we, if to try to get this done early next year, that we notify all the incumbents, the staff can notify all the incumbents this month that their term is up, and invite them to reapply, send a letter and a resume. We would also advertise that all these seats are vacant, that there are vacancies in the seats. The incumbents don't have a guarantee to get them back. They don't have a right to the seat. We would advertise online, put a ad in Valley Mirror, basically stating that these positions are available, set a deadline sometime mid-January. That would give us a week or so to go through the resumes, get them out to all of council, and notify the applicants that they would be required to attend the January 25th, 2023 agenda meeting, where we would do a quick interview as we've done in the past, and then council could make appointments to those boards and commissions on February 1st of 2023, if that would be your pleasure.
Questions or comments? All right, then let's move on to item Q, discuss approving a resolution to appoint a hearing examiner to settle an appeal of a disability pension.
2 months ago, we had an agenda item to whether it's a grant or denied disability pension. Council ultimately denied it based upon the information they had. The officer has appealed that, and we will work with Mr. McTiernan's office to get a hearing officer appointed, and the officer would present his case. The officer and his attorney would present his case. We would present our case to the hearing examiner, and basically we would abide by whatever decision the hearing examiner makes, because they would be a professional that's skilled in this disability pension arena for police officers. And, we would abide by it. And that would be part of the resolution. The resolution would state who the hearing examiner is, what we're paying him, and the fact that we would abide by his decision, his or her decision, I'm sorry. And then we really shouldn't discuss anything beyond that, because it is a sensitive personnel matter.
Well, to that end, I'll move to the last agenda item, which is discuss a resolution to submit a COVID-19 small water and sewer system grant application.
I had mentioned in my report last month that Mr. Ziskal's office was going to work on an application to this. It's actually called the COVID-19 Small Water and Sewer System Grant through the state. They're using there is a small water and sewer system grant program. There's a separate program now that they're using COVID money to fund. And we're going to make application to begin the process of separating the storm and sanitary sewers in the M48 drainage area. And that's the area south of Monroe Street on McClure, Church, Commercial, Pocono, that whole area over there, everything basically that drains toward Memorial Park. It's an all combined sewer system. And there is grant money through this, through Alcosan, through a couple of programs they have, and through DEP. We're going to apply to all of them to get as much as we can to start some project there to try to separate those storm sanitary sewers.
Wonderful. Any comments or questions? Well, you all made it through the agendas. Let's move to our departmental reports. Police report, Chief Watson.
Good evening, everyone. Addressing the stop sign, Mr. President. I spoke with Mr. Meyer when I received the complaint from Mrs. Ansel, and his complaint was more about the visibility of the stop sign than the enforcement, because we have been doing traffic details up there, and he expressed his understanding that we can't be there 24 hours a day, and it's an ongoing problem. So I can't address what he wanted, which was like a flashing beacon, a solar power flashing beacon on the stop sign. I think that would fall more under Public Works, or maybe Mr. Batchy's expertise, not mine. So, but I did speak with him. He was happy with our doing the details up there. He said he appreciated that and that we responded to his complaint. So you want to go ahead, Mr. Batchy? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I can respond to it either now or in my report. If you have other things, go ahead and I can follow up.
Okay. On November 15th, we had a community meeting discussing Neighborhood Watch. It was well attended. I think it was a good meeting. Well, we had very good feedback on it from the residents, and we're going to continue to work on building that Neighborhood Watch to have good communication between the neighborhood and the police department. I enjoyed the meeting. It was a good night to get out and speak with the residents, and it was very enjoyable. The officer came with me, Sergeant Zakia. It was the first time he had done that, and I thought it was very positive. And thank you to the council members and the mayor for showing up, and Mr. Batchy. So we're moving to do those positive things. And as a police officer, it's enjoyable to have the good feedback because we don't always get that. The last thing I have is on the 18th of December from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the old West Junior High School, where we're going to be located hopefully soon temporarily. We'll be doing a toy giveaway with Toys for Pittsburgh Pikes. They're going to provide a large volume of bicycles. They've done coats in the past, winter coats, gloves, things like that, toys. We're advertising it on local radio stations and through social media. It's been a big event in the past. We've given away, over 10,000 items at these events. It's also neighboring police departments come assist us with this. So, like Edgewood, Braddock Hills, Wilkinsburg, Monroeville and Penn Hill said they're going to participate this year. Edgewood, I think I thought Churchill, Wilkins, all the way through the east. We're working together to have this big event, and the officers enjoy it very much. Get to see a lot of people, and hope if you need something and you're looking for something you're having difficulty providing for your family, we're there with things for you to hand out at Christmas time. So that's all I have for tonight.
Chief, I have a quick
Yes.
question. Is there any
Yes.
kind of way we can get some flyers, a flyer created for this?
We have
And
we have flyers.
Okay. Okay,
Yes.
cool. Because I want to
You want me
have,
to? I can include you when I email it out because we're going to work on this week. We're already working with the radio stations. We're going to work on the social media stuff over the next
Could
week.
you email everybody so I can go on?
Yes, I
didn't
can.
get one either. When is it? Chief?
Absolutely. It'll be December 18th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And I will email all council the flyer we have produced.
Okay.
thanks. I'd like to organize basically passing out flyers on respective blocks.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks.
I appreciate that.
Thanks.
That's
Thanks,
all I
Chief.
have for tonight. Yep.
Mr. Batchy, do you just want to address, since we initially put that under police, the Mr. Mahler's concern?
Unfortunately, the flashing red beacons on a stop sign aren't permitted by PennDOT as a permanent installation. Because everything PennDOT wants is standardization. And although it's a borough road, we have to follow PennDOT standards because we receive funding from them through liquid fuels for that street. For all streets in the borough. So we have to follow their rules on the signage and stuff. So you're only allowed to have a stop sign there, and then there's supplemental signs like those yellow ones that say traffic from left, traffic from right doesn't stop or whatever. But one thing we could look at doing is maybe put a stop ahead sign, a few hundred feet back from it. I know exactly where it's talking about. It's a tough location because there's a parking lane, and then the stop sign is at the end of basically the end of the parking lane. If you're not familiar with the area, I can understand why people run the stop sign because they're not looking for it because it's a lane over. You're not traveling right next to it. But unfortunately, those flashing beacons, they can be used for up to 90 days when a new stop sign is put in to say, hey, look, here's to get your attention that, hey, here's a new stop sign. But they can't be used as a permanent installation.
Could we, I don't know what the situation looks like on paint. Could we paint the street? I know with, big white letters, stop and whatnot. I mean, maybe it's already painted that way, but is there something we could do on the street level that could help increase visibility?
We could, but we can't do it now because the ground temperature is too cold.
Sure.
But I mean, it's something we could put on our radar to do first thing in the spring. Yeah, we could put a big stop bar there and the word stop, right? Even with the stop sign. We have them at a lot of intersections, not all intersections, but this one that's a problematic one. We could certainly do that. And like I said, put a stop ahead sign back 200 feet or so, just to try to get your attention.
Well, why don't you work with Mr. D'Ambrosio and kind of figure out what the best plan to try to address this because it sounds, it sounds like a number of people acknowledge the difficulty of this one. So Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Batchy. All right, let's move to Code and Fire. Chief Wilhelm.
For the sake of expediency, try to keep this very brief and short. First of all, I'd like to thank council for acting on the full-time positions. It's really been needed. As you know, we've lost some part-time employees. We just had 2 more resignations since the last time we met. One firefighter got hired full-time in DC, a while ago and used to commute back and work weekends for us. I visited his family. He has since resigned, and another, just due to his tenure there and his age, decided he'd had enough and it's time for him to step aside. So this is really important for us to be able to fill shifts, and I really thank council for the ability to do this. 2 of our firefighters are being trained in car seat installation. The police used to do that, but because there was limited opportunities for them to get recertified, that had gone by the wayside. I checked with Chief Watson before that opportunity presented itself for us. We sent 2 to get they're going to be finishing their training. I think it's 24 hours this weekend to be certified for that. So we will offer that service as another service to our residents at the fire station. And well, that's it. That's the only 3 important things that aren't on the agenda I needed to address. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for that report. Okay, let's move on to Public Works. Mr. D'Ambrosio.
Yes, good evening. Yeah, I'd like to say that leaf collection officially ended today, and I think the guys did a really good job. We also did pick up the Christmas tree yesterday, and we were able to put it up today, and we're going to have that decorated by the end of the week, as well as the menorah and the Kwanzaa banner. The salt spreaders and plows, we're all ready for winter. Hopefully we don't get a lot of snow, but we are prepared. And as far as the banners, like I said earlier, we got finally finished up with our leaf collection. So that frees up about 3 or 4 guys, 3 or 4 of the more experienced guys, which they're going to be on that job because they're a little more knowledgeable in that area. And we will have a crew out next week to finish the banners. That's it.
Great, thank you. All right, not seeing any other questions or comments. We'll keep going. Let's move to the Finance Committee or Finance Report. Ms. Longenecker.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I don't know why I can't get my face on there, but that's okay. Sarah, could you put up my slides for me, please? Okay, this first one is revenues from November 2021. If you can look on to the left, well, if you're looking at it, it's on the left-hand side. The total revenues for November there would be $295,501.91. That was last year at this time. And then there's all the other departments in the revenue section. I'm not going to go over all of them since we are running very late. I'll make sure that all the council gets a copy of all of these forms. Can you go to the next one, Sarah, for me? Thanks. Okay, this is the expenses for 2021. And that amount would be $479,375.74. That was in November of 2021, which is the same period that we're in now. The next one, hun. Okay, revenues as of today. Total revenues is $302,572.78. Can you go to the next one, please? The expenses total is $705,625.83. And then it has all of the other expenses as to what the percentages are. Okay, the next one. This is the revenues for the entire year from November 21st to 2022. And it gives you the different amounts on the bottom. And like the real estate, all of the whole entire revenues goes across all the way, including the total revenues for both years. And the next one is the total expenses done exactly the same way. And the next one is expenses and income for November 2021. And the next one is the expenses for 2022. And the next one is the total income for both years. And the final one is the expenses for both years. And like I said, I'll make sure that everybody gets a copy of all of these so they can look at them more closely.
Ms. Longenecker, those last two slides, the total expenses and total income, are those year to date from January 1st to whatever,
November 30th. Yeah,
okay, for each day. Okay. Or for each year. Thank you.
you're welcome. Does anybody else have any other questions? No? Okay, thanks so much, Sarah.
Okay, let's move on to the borough manager report, Mr. Batchy.
Thank you. It was brought up earlier about the county, about the trail grant for that there's a, that we've been working on for some time. I actually just talked to Darla Cravata from Rich Fitzgerald's office today. And, she was asking me what the holdup was. And I told her, I said, well, our project manager wanted a revised scope of work. Mr. Ziskow had sent it to them several months ago. And she asked me to forward that to her. So, and that was right at the end of the day, and I was trying to get ready for this meeting, so I haven't sent it to her. So I will send it to her in the morning, and hopefully once they get that, they'll get the contracts in process, because that's what we're waiting for is the contract with the county. There's two county grants, the CITF and the GEDF grant, and a state grant through the Greenways Trails and Recreation Program involved for it. It's a total of $375,000. But until we have the county, we have the grant with the contract with the state in place, but we still need to get the contracts for the other two county grants in place. But like I said, I did speak to Ms. Cravata today, and one thing I know about her, when she gets involved, stuff gets done. So I'm sure that that'll be coming forthwith. The traffic signal at Church and South Braddock, I know I reported last month it was supposed to be done the week after the meeting. The traffic systems wasn't able to get to it because some other things with some storms elsewhere came up, and they had to take care of some projects. I did talk to him yesterday at traffic systems, and hopefully by the end of next week it's up. So that'll be the dedicated left turn arrow going westbound, so you can make the turn from under the bridge. And the last thing I have is Amanda Settlemeyer from Turtle Creek Cog reached out to me about 2 weeks ago about to inform me that the health department was putting in a grant to the EPA for $10 million to replace municipal vehicles in 20 municipalities in the Mon Valley area, Swissvale being one of them. And basically what they're trying to do is get what we talked about earlier, more fuel efficient vehicles on the road, less polluting vehicles on the road, replace some of our older stock. What we would have to do is, if we got money for it to replace some of these vehicles, we would have to drill 2 holes in the engines of the vehicles that we would be replacing, and submit photographic evidence. There's no match for this money. So I sent a list of about 12 vehicles that would be good candidates for that we could upgrade at no cost through that health department grant. It is basically, it kind of come out of nowhere last minute because she needed the list the day before Thanksgiving. She called me about a week before, but I jumped on that, gave her a list of a number of things we could replace that in all departments. So including the ladder truck in the fire department, because as I mentioned in my budget comments, the reason it would need a refurbishment in 2027 is because under the NFPA rules, a ladder truck should not be a first line vehicle after 15 years old. But by refurbishing it extensively, you can extend the life of it as a first line vehicle. But with that being said, if we could get something replaced for free, we might as well go for it. So, and they do make they don't make an electric ladder truck, because they just can't, they don't have the power to lift the ladders and hold the ladders and sustain them through a long fire. But they do make, this vehicle was built in 2009, and it goes by the 2007 emission standards. So we would be upgrading to the, I think it's 2020 emission standards that are currently in place. So there would be quite a benefit to the environment to go to a newer truck. So we put that in, and if we can get funding for it, it'd be wonderful. If we can't, if we can get some of the other stuff we put in for police cars, public works vehicles, that's great too. We also have a 1983 Kubota tractor that we still use a few days a week. I'm sure that is polluting the environment more than the rest of the fleet combined. So we did put in for replacement of that too. So hopefully we'll get something, because anything, anything we can get for free, I'm all for. That is all I have.
Sounds like a great opportunity. Thanks, Mr. Batchy. Any comments or questions with him? All right, President's report. I don't really have anything. I knew this was gonna be a long meeting. We met in executive session for purposes of personnel and litigation that I needed to share. And I wanted to invite the mayor, Mayor Schwartzwelder, to talk a little about Night of Lights.
Thanks, Chris. Saturday, we will be celebrating our tree lighting at the fire department on Irvine Street. Tree is lit by Santa Claus around 6 o'clock, and everyone is invited to come and do some crafts and have refreshments, sing some carols. The Swissville Library will also host a table with a craft and some book giveaways. So everyone's welcome Saturday, December 3rd, starting at 5:30 at the fire department. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Let's move to the solicitor report. Mr. Mangelo.
No report from me. Thanks for having me tonight, though.
Absolutely, glad to have you. All right, item 6 on our agenda, other new business. Yes, Mr. Price.
I just had a thought, and I figured I'd raise it during new business. Mr. Batchy had explained that when we move up to the closed school, that we would be heating a zone of the school, not of course the whole building. But I was wondering if there would be space up there, since the borough would be running operations out of that zone, if there would be a spare classroom where we could get back to having in-person council meetings. I mean, I don't know how much space is available, but if we're going to be heating a couple extra classrooms or something, maybe that's something that we could look at.
We have to determine with the school district, with Mr. Finney, which rooms, we know which rooms on one side of the hall. We're not sure on the other side which ones he was proposing for us to use. But we can certainly look at it. I mean, there was one larger classroom over there. I mean, it's nowhere near the size of what we had as a council chambers, but there is, I mean, you could do, maybe do something in there.
This is a great suggestion, Mr. Price. Yeah, so let's keep that on our radar as they move in, figure out if there's something we can use in the meantime before we have our new true borough building. Anything else? New business? Well, then I'd love to entertain a motion to adjourn at 9:34 p.m.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, move second and thirded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, enjoy the rest of your week. See ya.
Good night. Right.